Starting the video. Okay, cool. Alright, hi everybody. This is Emily and Earl and David. And then we've got a full house tonight at Alpine Shop Kirkwood, so we're mostly going to speak to our class, but if anyone's watching on Facebook, we're happy to have you. So welcome everyone to the first class of Adventure Racing 101. We already had our first session of Adventure Racing 201 on Saturday. Alice was there, Ted was there, what's your name? Sandy was there, Alan was there. Anyone else that I missed? The Erics, right? Or one of the Erics in the back? Yeah. So we have one more session of the 201 series coming up on the 17th. That's basically, it's out in the woods. We give you a map, we hang controls, these things out there, and then you just have 4 hours to practice navigating. You can either do it by foot, by bike, by paddle, but we're not really around a ton of water. But it's just like kind of, no pressure, take as much time as you want, because it's really hard. Like, we'll teach you everything we can in a 1 hour, 90-minute classroom session, but the real way that you can learn how to be a better navigator is by actually getting out with a map in your hand and looking at the woods and getting to controls on your own. So we just wanted to give people kind of a chance to do that outside of the classroom. So that's our 201 series. So, and I mentioned we have 101, so this is the first of 4 classroom sessions for AR101. They're every Monday in November, so this is the first one tonight. And then we'll talk about biking next week, and then paddling the week after that, and then kind of some race day strategy the final week leading into the race, along with the gear associated with those different sports, tips that we've kind of picked up after racing a whole bunch, to just help everybody kind of go into the Castlewood 8-hour with as much knowledge as we can give you to make sure that race day is pretty stress-free as possible. It's always like, it's your first time race, it's always going to be like, oh my gosh, this is a whole new world, but we just want to make sure that everything that we can help you with before the race is available. So that's our goal. I really want to just introduce yourself real quick.
Yeah, my name is Scott Erlandson, but everybody calls me Earl, that's my nickname. I've been adventure racing since the early 2000s, and it's just been a very life-fulfilling sport for me. I've gotten to see a lot of different parts of the United States, different parts of the world, and that's kind of how Emily and I met, and life's been really good, and this will be our 4th year as the co-race directors, and we just have so much fun getting people out, and a lot of first-time racers, and you get to see them come back, and you can talk a little bit more about the expansion of.
Yeah.
You saw our group this year.
Yeah, so my name's Emily. Like Earl said, we took over the Castlewood 8-hour adventure race from Bonkard Racing in 2015. So this 2018 is going to be our 4th year putting the race on. The race as a whole has been going on. This will be the 13th year, I believe. So it's a pretty long-running race. We've grown it when we took it over from 200 racers. Now this year we have 300, so we're super excited about it. A little scared because like 300 adventure racers is a little exciting, but we just want to make sure that everyone that wants to try an adventure race has that opportunity. So that's our goal. The Castlewood 8-hour was my very first adventure race in 2009, so I was totally hooked from literally the start gun, and we ran down a road for like a quarter of a mile, and then the entire race took off just straight into the woods up a huge hill, and I had never experienced anything like that before. Like, why are these people not running on the road or a trail? But it was just like something that it was new to me, but in a very exciting way, and I've kind of been hooked ever since. So it's just adventure racing is something that takes the endurance portion of athletics and combines it with teamwork that a lot of individual endurance sports don't experience. So you're with your team the whole time, through the worst parts of the race and through the best parts of the race. So you really get to experience a whole lifetime. Maybe not in an 8-hour race, but you can sometimes. But definitely over the longer races, it's like you just go through the worst of it and the best of it the whole time with your team. So it's a great sport. Glad everyone's here wanting to learn more. And yeah, David, want to say who you are?
I'm David Frye. Actually, I've got this neat little wheelchair.
Oh yeah, Uh-oh.
Wait, there it goes.
Okay.
Very slow. Anyway, I'm started classical orienteering in which Venturation uses a large part of in I feel weird like
Yeah.
back in the early to mid 80s, and how this if I can get my head in sync. Anyway, early to mid 80s, and then in year 2000, some of my buddies in orienteering said, "Hey, there's this thing called adventure racing." Adventure racing was pretty new back then, and we tried that and loved it because we were all mountain bikers and all too, and we called ourselves the Orienteers, which then slowly, after some time, morphed into the Alpine shop. So I was sponsored by Alpine, with Team Alpine shop, and Emily joined our team a good number of years ago. I forget how
Like
many.
at least 4?
Yeah. So we had a big run of success, and had a lot more important than that. We just had a lot of fun. I just realized, a side note, that on a Halloween costume party, going dressed as Lou Garrett actually gets no laughs. So I thought it was that yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I thought it was funny. I thought it was funny, but nobody got it, and then when I explained, nobody laughed. So,
We can laugh.
anyway, that's
Okay.
so that's who I am. Should I just launch?
Yeah,
Yep.
launch.
Okay.
Proceed.
Since you provided these maps,
And just the
You might as well-
format for today is like questions,
Yeah.
raise your hand or shout them out, or like you don't need to wait till the end.
that's a big, ginormous USGS map, which is 1 to 24,000, which is common. USGS maps are almost always 1 to 24,000, which means 1 inch on the map is 24,000 inches on the ground. So if you got a calculator or your phone on you and you want to like measure how far you have to go, believe it or not, you don't really have to know anything. Just if it's 1 to 24,000, just here I got to go 3 inches on the map. Multiply by 24,000. I got to go, was that 70 something thousand inches, and then you just divide by 12 and divide by 5,280, and you can do the math. So you don't really have to memorize stuff. Once you know what that means, you're good to go.
And on these, so just a little bit of background about these maps. These are actual race maps from 2015.
And then there's
Everyone get one?
those are USGS maps. This is an orienteering map of Hahn State Park, which is going to be a big orienteering meet in a few weeks. And that's 1 to 15,000, which is common. And these are a lot more detailed. USGS maps like you have, which adventure races usually use, they don't have a lot of detail. They have roads, they've got some buildings, you can't count on it, but they have contour lines. And so navigating off of USGS maps is a bit tricky. Orienteering maps might look harder, but when you learn how to do it, it makes things a lot easier. Does everyone know what a contour line is? Is there anyone who doesn't?
Shout it out from the audience. What's
Anyone
a
who
contour
doesn't?
line?
No, I don't.
Oh.
Okay, the contour lines are for most for most adventure race navigating, at least the advanced navigating. Contour lines is your bread and butter. That's what you can count. Contour lines are the brown squiggly lines, all the brown squiggly lines. And what those are is if you take one line and follow it along, you are staying at a certain elevation. So if you dammed up the place and you made a big lake, one of the contour lines would be the shoreline of the lake. And then if you let the lake go up another 20 feet in elevation, then the next line. So that those brown squiggly lines tells you the lay of the land, the hills, the hillside. Obviously, there's some when they're really close together, that means it's really steep. When they're really far apart, that means it's getting kind of subtle and flat.
Circle means the top, right?
Oh yeah, yes. Not always.
Okay.
There, if you go in, there's certain places like Cliff Cave parts, you know, down in like there's a good Rogaine they used to have in Mammoth Cave, has a ton of sinkholes, and then you'll see all these circles, you know, getting doot doot doot, looks like hilltops, but it's really dimples of a golf ball, or a bunch of sinkholes all over. So sometimes, you know, 99.9% of the time the circles are hilltops. Some of the time, now usually on an OMAP, always, and actually even on USGS maps, if it's a depression, they'll put a little tick mark that points downhill. So like you'll see the circle, and off of the circle will be just this little teeny little brown, you know, dead end tick mark, and that points downhill. Usually they don't put them on hilltops because that's what they all are. But if it's a sinkhole, they'll often put a tick mark on it. So when you hear hoof steps, think horses, not zebras. When you see round circles, think hilltops, not sinkholes. So one little thing, just for quick reference, this might kind of be obvious, but I find if I'm running fast and trying to make sense of the map quickly, if you kind of know what's up and what's down, and that's usually kind of your brain usually just figures it out from creeks and stuff. But if you notice, you know, when contour lines make this arc, I call it pointing. You know, just you see a lot of spots where the contour lines make a U-turn. Well, reentrants or water courses or creeks, you know, ditches, reentrants point the U-turn of the brown line point uphill. And on spurs, the U-turn points downhill. That's not something you really need to know, but I just find that if you just kind of keep that in your head, it can help you make sense of what's a spur and what's a reentrant. Because you see all these, if you go along a hillside, you see all these brown lines going in and out and in and out and in and out. Because one, you know, it's a spur and then a ditch, reentrant, then a spur, then a ditch. You know, as you go along the big hillside. And if you want to know which is which, you know, at a glance, just think the U-turn of the spur points downhill and the U-turn of the reentrant points uphill. Does that make sense?
I think we had some questions about this at our Saturday session, and the way, because the map that we used on Saturday had several reentrants, and several of our controls were hung in reentrants, and we had some people that were like, I do not know what that word means. So, and I didn't either when I started learning how to navigate. So kind of the way to describe it is I just take my fist, and if you can picture like this, where your knuckles are is kind of like a ridge top. So that's the highest kind of point of land as you go along, and so then each of your knuckles would be a little hilltop. Then your fingers, as they go down, that would be the spur. So it's basically a descending hill is the spur. And then this little, the crease in between your fingers here, that would be your reentrant. So anytime if there's a rainstorm, the reentrants are the low ground, and that's where the creeks are going to be, you know, the water's going to collect there and start to form a creek as it goes downhill. So that's, you know, reentrants have a lot of other names. Kind of when you get out more towards the mountain area, they're called draws. A really small reentrant would be a ditch. But in general, and especially in Missouri, we have this classic ridge reentrant type topography, and that means there's these big ridge systems, and then spurs kind of coming off those ridges, and then reentrants in between. So that's kind of how the topography of the Missouri area is laid out. When you go other parts of the country, there's a little, you know, they all have their own different styles. Like up in Minnesota and Wisconsin, it's more like glaciated, little depressions, very more subtle. But in Missouri here, we're pretty classic with, there's ridge systems, spurs coming off of them, reentrants in between the spurs, and that just connects us.
And you were saying basically the U-turn, the U shape is the reentrance in the map. Is what you're saying.
Is a reentrant or the spur, depending on which one. They both make U's. That's how it's. That's why the only reason I'm saying that is. Now the thing is, spurs, the U-turn on a spur is usually rounded. Spurs just happen to be
the outside.
Yeah.
So this would be more spurish.
Right.
Yeah.
And then this would be your
And
reentrant.
reentrants tend to be sharp because the water carves a ditch.
Got it.
And in a way, it's kind of semantics, unless you're talking about sinkholes or hilltops. Pretty much everything around here is a ridge or a spur or a reentrant. Everything. I mean, the Mississippi River is really a reentrant.
one
just-
gigantor.
It's just so big. It's semantics. When it gets really big, you call it a river, and then when it's kind of big, you call it a big creek, and then when it gets up more on the hillside, it's a reentrant. When it's really tiny, it's a ditch. But they're really all the same thing. And a spur is basically a ridge.
Mm-hmm. Another kind of way that I describe a spur is it's also very much like your nose. And we actually talk about this when we're out navigating. As a team, you need to really communicate when you're in the field where people should go. And so we talk about just walk down the nose of the spur. That means stay in the center of the spur as you walk down to the low ground. Sometimes if you're wanting to cheat, angle your team east or west or north or south or whatever it is, you'd say, oh, you can just slide off the right side of the spur, and then that's kind of how you're walking. So that's another visual aid that everyone has a nose, everyone has a fist that you can always make
Hopefully they don't connect.
right, yeah.
Yeah, let's say your spur's too big.
Right. But that's literally how we describe it when we're out racing. We want to direct our team, just stay on the nose of the spur, and then you just stay on the center of it.
Let me go through a couple things before I just get into nav. On orienteering maps, white is woods, green is heavy woods, heavy, hard to run through thickets and stuff, and yellow is field, open field. On USGS maps, it's completely different. Green is woods, and white is open fields or open ground. Now on USGS maps, you can't count on that. USGS maps, if you look down on the bottom, different maps are made at different times. A lot of them are made in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and then they get updated. The purple is updating. The purple is what they updated it with. So USGS maps tend to be really outdated, so you can't count. If you're trying to navigate on, it says this should be a field here because it's white, or it's supposed to be woods, it's green, you might, contour lines don't change, at least in our lifetime. So,
Yeah, this one is actually a combination of 4 different sets of data. Part of the map is from 1982 and part of the map is from 1993. So especially because this is in the Eureka area, it's actually, Eureka, the town, is labeled here. Those buildings were there somewhere between those 2 years, 87 and 93, right? 82 and 93. So if there's been buildings built since 1993, they're not going to show up in this version of the map. And when we're making maps, because we custom make all the maps for our races, if there's an important building that's really key, we'll put it on the map. We're not trying to trick anybody with their ancient knowledge of Eureka, the town. So if there's something important, we'll put it on there for you. But in general, it's just showing okay, that's where the most of the city center is, as you're progressing through that part of the race.
That's basically flying into, let's do navigation. Something I don't plan to teach because I don't really like it. It does have its place, is shooting a bearing with a compass, with a spinning bezel. I don't know if you probably heard that, people heard that. A lot of compasses have a little bezel that you can spin the thing, and then you line the red arrow up, put the red in the shed is one way to call it, and then you shoot a bearing and you just follow the compass and go, I'm going to go way over there and just kind of keep following and not really read the map. That does, especially if you're in flat ground, floodplain or something, that it can have its purpose. I just don't find it fun, and in adventure racing and orienteering, I just don't use it that much. You kind of have to go with one way or the other. You can look that up online. Shooting a bearing is something you can look up online. So I thought I'd just kind of skip over that. Because it's fairly mechanical. It's a mechanical process.
And the other kind of way that we talk about shooting a bearing, it's nice at night, or like David said, when it's flat. But if you can kind of picture, this is a map of Greensfelder. You probably are aware that Greensfelder is super hilly. If you're just, I'm going to pick, it doesn't matter. If you're trying to get from point A to point B, and you just throw a straight line in between the two, it's you're probably going up and down 3 or 4 hills if you stay on that straight line. There's probably a slightly longer but less hilly way if you orient the map and kind of follow the terrain. So
So that's my next thing, is orient the map. So this is the other way. And you can kind of shoot bearings by orienting the map. When I say shoot a bearing, it means you just use the magnetic lines of the, of the Earth. You use the needle and you just follow the compass. That's shooting a bearing. Now orienting the map, that's the way I like to orient here. And I use a thumb compass. It's actually just like a $100 compass, just because the needle's real good. But it doesn't do anything. If nothing spins, it just has the needle. And you can do it with a base plate. I just lay the map, the compass on the map, and all I'm looking at, most compasses you have might have fancier bits and all. To orient the map, all you're paying attention to is the spinning needle. That's all you care about. And you pull the needle on the map and you turn the map until the red part of the needle is pointing north on the map, is lined up with the north-south lines on the map. Now orienteering maps, they have little black lines that are magnetic north. Orienteering maps are made to magnetic north. If you move around the country, magnetic north isn't always true north. USGS maps are lined up to true north. Basically the magnetic lines are in about Hudson Bay, whatever, the big bay up in
Canada.
Yeah. So they all kind of point that way. So as you go west, the magnetic north lines actually point to the northeast. If you go east, they point the other way. We're lucky. In St. Louis, we're pretty much dang near dead on. So you can just use the true north, magnetic north. It doesn't matter. We can just ignore that here in St. Louis.
It's a great place to learn how to
Yeah.
orienteer and map and compass navigate, because you don't have to adjust for any magnetic declination.
Now, when I've done an adventure race on the West Coast once, it was like 23 degrees off. And what I did before the race is I actually drew in on the map my magnetic north lines 23 degrees off. So when I'm out there in the middle of the night, I just go by my lines I made. So I think I'm going too slow here. So anyway, does everybody understand orient the map? So you just turn it. Now the good thing about that is when you orient the map, there's a spot where you are, and there's a spot, assuming you know where you are, there's a spot on the map where you are, and there's a spot where you're going. Well, if you're going there, it's always on the map. It's always straight ahead. That's kind of nice, because I'm going that way, and I have my map oriented, so it's ahead of me. It just makes everything simple. And then you can see, well, there's this like hilltop. You can see a little bit off to the right on your map. Say, imagine this. Well, if you look up, you say, oh, well, there's a hilltop. And in that way, you can kind of shoot a bearing without actually spinning any compass dial or anything. You just shoot it on the paper. You draw imaginary lines. You say, oh, I'm here. I'm going up here. So, if my paper is perfectly oriented to north, I can just do that imaginary line on the paper and then look up, and I've shot a bearing. And I haven't done any of this little fancy. And the good thing about that is as you're shooting the bearing, you're also reading the map. When you do the old-fashioned that they love to teach in orienteering classes or Cub Scout or Boy Scouts where you think, well, now you're not reading the map. You're just following this compass, and if you go wrong, you're wrong. You don't know. So is that orienting the map and shooting bearings, I guess you could say, roughly shooting bearings off of orienting the map, that is like the most important thing you could do for navigating in an orienteering NATO adventure race. I keep losing my little... Oh, here it is. So, now the next thing I do, this is my... I didn't invent this. Top orienteers all do this. Is thumb the map. And it's in a race. Now, if you're just hiking in Colorado, you don't want to do this. Your thumb will get tired. But this is the way of keeping track of where you are. And I've found, like, if you're going along for a long time, I'm going and I'm in a race. I'm trying to save time. Well, I look at the map. Well, when you look at the map, even though you kind of know where you are, it takes like 15 seconds. Like, where am I? Oh yeah, I'm here. Or usually it takes me longer than that. Well, you have to do that a whole bunch of times. Pretty soon, you're wasting a serious amount of time, and you could just get lost. So what I do is I very carefully fold crud out of my map, and I just fold it up so that I can always, as I go, I keep folding it so that I can always put don't be kind to the map. I can always put my thumb, and graphs are tight, I can always put my thumb right next to where I am. Usually just off to the side is where I am. And then where I'm going is, just where I'm going. And that way, I can be going along, looking where I'm stepping and stuff, and I can just glance at the map. Because I don't have to find myself. I just look right next to my thumb. Yeah, that's where I am. And then, as I'm going, obviously, I just kind of slowly inch my thumb. Every time I can see I've made progress on the map, just inch your thumb forward. And then every so often you have to refold the map and be mean to it again. And by thumbing the map, you can do, I'm going to jump way ahead, my thing is something I told somebody a long time ago, they said really helped them. You can be an accountant. And it sounds boring, I'm not an accountant, that would bore me, but you really do want to check off what you've passed. Keeping track of where you are is so important, because if you just say, well, I'm just going to go get over in that area and then I'll figure out where I am. That, even a good orienteer, that just is disastrous. I mean, sometimes it works, but when it doesn't, you waste so much time going in circles. Now, where am I? Because all the reentrants look the same, So basically, orienting the map, thumbing the map, and as I thumb the map, that's why I hold my thumb compass. So when I look at the map and I'm in a race, I look at the compass needle first to make sure it's roughly lined up. The map is roughly lined up with north, and then I look next to my thumb where I am. And every time I look at the map, I do the boop boop, but it's really quick. And I'm not, unless I'm in some floodplain shooting a bearing, I'm not worried about getting it to the nitty gritty of orienting. You can be kind of quick about it. So it just always compass map, or compass next to the thumb. And next time I look, compass next to the thumb, about that quick. And anyway, it's just little tricks that just make things go so much nicer. Because when you keep track of where you are and things are going well, it's easy. And then when you get lost, it gets really hard.
I'm just going to jump in real quick. So I had an awesome experience this year at Nationals. Like, normally the teams that I race with at Nationals, like David and I race together, Earl and I race together, like straight up, we're trying to win, go as fast as we can, and be as competitive as we can. And this year at Nationals, I got to team up with two guys from St. Louis that we actually met through the race, that were like, our whole goal was just to go, have a great experience. They weren't trying to win, they just wanted a good experience at a really kind of high-profile race. So it really kind of taught me about, like, I've never navigated with a person who is, like, just learning their navigation skills. So it kind of taught me about, like, what they were doing versus what David and other top orienteers are doing, to kind of, like, see the evolution of a good navigator. So the things that I noticed that beginner navigators should start practicing earlier, like David said, thumbing the map, like always keeping track of where you are, and then folding the map. Like, I see it's really common to have these are kind of big maps. There's a big map case, it's kind of thick plastic, hanging around your neck maybe. Like, it's just kind of hard. Like, there's a lot of map area to look at and figure out where you are. But if you can just fold it literally down to, like, the size of the leg that you're running, like this size, this is even kind of big, like maybe you want to put one more fold in there to really keep track of where you are. It just gives your brain, it helps it focus on exactly what you're doing. You don't get distracted or like, oh, I have this whole other bike leg that I'm trying to plan. Like, you don't need to plan that now. You need to focus on what you're doing. So, like, don't be afraid to, take your map out. If it's waterproof paper like this one is, like, just run with it.
Yeah. On a long race, the waterproof maps, they're supposedly waterproof, but the ink will come off. And occasionally you'll get to a spot where it's like, I have to go through this big white area with nothing on it because the ink ran off. And
We've been there too.
In the 24-hour races, you might need to be a little more careful on the map. If you've got waterproof maps and it's not raining, then on this coming race, if it's not raining, I wouldn't, and it's waterproof map, you got to make sure. I wouldn't even put it in a map case myself. And I don't really care. Of course, I'm kind of a sloppy person. I don't care if I got this big bit of map flapping all around. As long as I can have my thumb, as long as I got it folded on one side, so I can have my thumb right where I am. These people who are, there's a lot of top racers that go along with this map hanging on a lanyard. That's more power to them. That's not the way I do it. I can do it.
Quick question,
Yes.
going back to what you mentioned, marking off as you go. Are you like marking off every reentrant that you pass?
No. I don't
Or
mark
just
it
the
off.
front?
I use my thumb.
Oh.
I don't mark anything. I grab the map really tight. I probably have a really strong left thumb. I grab the map really tight. Oops. And
Got it.
and I just skid it. So if I slip and hit the ground and I pick my map up, obviously I got to start over. But usually if you know where you are, you can figure out where to go back to. My point is why take 10, 15 seconds every time you want to look at the map to figure out where you are. And if you do that, if you get good at being efficient at just glancing at the map right next to your thumb, you will look at it more often. And in my opinion, that the more often you look at it, the less likely you are to make a colossal error. And
Like how many times per minute would you look at the map?
well, it depends on the race. I mean, if I'm in a long leg in an adventure race, it might be not that much. But in an orienteering course race, I might, in a minute, 10, 15 times, 10 times. Depends. If I'm on an easy ridge where I'm like, okay, I just got to go down this ridge for a long ways until I, run off the end of it, then but even then I'll kind of start to take a few glances, just see where I'm going after that. Another thing, just to move on, is I try to simplify the map as much as possible. As you're going along, you don't necessarily have to check off every little detail you go by. If you've got kind of a long ways to go, and you can see bigger features, like I can see this hill, I can see this decent sized little knob or hill over there, and I know I got to go over it. Well, once you get, oh, well, I see what I need to get to. It's in my vision. Then you can forget about everything. That's rare. I don't like to forget about things when I'm navigating. But you can, okay, I just simplified it. I can forget about everything in between, and I just go there. And I can spend my time looking ahead, saying, now what do I have to do that later? So just whenever you can, you don't always have to check off every detail. When you can simplify it, do. When you can't simplify it, and it's like really complicated terrain, the control's coming up soon, then look at every detail you can. You can use attack points as much as possible. A good Scandinavian orienteering coach who I once went to a long time ago said that every control should have an attack point. I don't really agree, but when they're there, use them. What attack point is...
Oh yeah, what is an attack point?
Well, attack point
Wait,
is...
let's poll the audience. What is an attack point? Would anyone want to volunteer a guess?
Well, one, it's a cool website where you can log
Super
all your
cool,
where you can
yeah.
log all your training exercises and stuff.
Uh-huh.
But
Oh, yes.
So you might figure out something really close to where the control
Exactly.
is. And if you know it's up a ravine, you might get to the base
Yes.
of that ravine and then attack in. From
exactly, you don't have to. Yeah, that's exactly it. If there's a little pond that the control's 100 feet to the right of, and I'm like, oh, that's a pretty big pond. That should be easy to find. Why worry about finding the control first? Go find the pond, and then that's your attack point. Or you can go to a trail junction that's pretty close. And then once you get to the trail, because you can, if it's something you can find easily, an attack point you can find easily, then you can get there quickly. And then when you're there, then okay, I've got to that point now. The controls, 100 more meters or 50 more. Hopefully it's less than 100. 100 meters is pretty long for a attack point. Maybe 30 to 50 meters or something. This direction. And then I'm going to slow up and just kind of be careful, and boom, there. So that's attack points. I don't feel like every control has to have attack point, but if there is one, use it. Don't be embarrassed to pace count, or don't be too lazy to pace count.
What's pace counting?
Pace counting is where you count 1 foot. There's no reason to count 2, because then so I just take my right or my left foot, whatever mood I'm in, and I count each step, and then you know how
So,
far.
let me demonstrate.
Yeah.
1, 2,
Yep.
3,
And typically, so basically 2 steps is a pace in my mind. And typically for most people, if you're walking, it's about 60 paces for 100 meters. Everybody's different, so you can go out and practice. If you're really into it, it doesn't take that long to practice. If I'm
Most
run,
high school tracks have 100 meters
Yeah.
lined up, ready for
And if-
pace counting.
and keep in mind, if you're going through the woods and it's kind of thick, it's going to go longer. So you just kind of have to mentally. Sometimes if I'm going where it's kind of slow and thick, I'll just like skip counting one. Like, I'll go 1, and I'll like just not count 1, and then I'll go 2, and I might not count another one, and I'll go 3. That's one way to do it. If you're running, typically about 40 paces, 80 basically, because I'm only counting 1 foot. 40 paces is 100 meters. Now I've found, just really simplified, a lot of compasses have a scale for 1 to 15,000, because that's a common orienteering scale. If you have a 1 to 15,000, and there's just a little shortcut, and you're using a 1 to 24,000 USGS map, every little tick mark, every little number is about 100 paces if you're walking fast. So if you can kind of get used to that stuff, and I don't pace count all the time. In fact, I find it really boring, and kind of it's just not a fun thing to do. But
That's where your teammates come in.
yeah,
So this is a great way to kind of involve the entire team when you're navigating. You're going to have one set of maps, so you're going to have one navigator kind of leading the charge, and that person might change from checkpoint to checkpoint depending on your strategy. But then you've either got one teammate if you're a 2-person team, or 3 other teammates if you're a 4-person team. That it gets really boring for them too if all they're doing is following the leader. So you can have a navigator that's like, okay, here's our general direction of travel, here's the landmarks we're looking for, and we need to go 400 meters, whatever it is. Then your next teammate can be like, oh, great, something for me to do. I can pace count for 400 meters. And then another teammate can be like, oh, great, I'll look out for that hilltop that we talked about and the trail junction that we need to find for our attack point. So it's just really spread those responsibilities around.
it kind of kills the conversation. But if you're racing, maybe save the conversation for. I mean, I'm not saying don't have fun, but maybe you're racing, maybe save the conversation for the bar afterwards.
Or the boat.
Or
Paddling is a great time to chat.
Yeah, or the award ceremony. But our Jeff Sona would be my pace counter a lot, and if we had a long way to go, I'll just be going, and he'll just go 100, and then we'll go for a while, and then he'll just say 200, and so pace counting is something. It's really helpful if you're going down a creek and there's this big hillside with 50 reentrants. Well, I'm being exaggerated, but a whole bunch of reentrants going down, and the control is up in one of those. Well, you can kind of try. One thing is you can try to count them. That's easier to do if you're thumbing the map, because you can use that to kind of keep track. Okay, I just went by 1, so I'm going to move my thumb up to the next one. Okay, I just went by the next one. That's one way, but if you can actually use your compass, the little scale on your compass, to be right before I start, going down this long way, I can say, oh, it's going to be 500 meters. That's a long way. That's a big long leg, but 500 meters, and so I can say, oh, I got to count to this. And that way, and especially at nighttime, so often you get suckered by something that's before what you really want. You're going down, it's up this reentrant, it's kind of a long way down, it's up this reentrant, off to your right, and you're going down at night, and you say, hey, there's a reentrant, I bet that might be it. And somebody will say, no, we're only at half the pace. That's so common. No, we're supposed to count to 300, and we're only at 150. Keep going, dude. Oh man, that keeps you out of trouble so many times. If it's obvious and I know where I'm going, I don't pace count because it's just not fun.
Maybe a dumb question. Can you use a watch
Yeah.
while you're on it?
Yeah.
So if you have a rough estimate of your pace and it's going to be a long distance, you
Yeah.
use that as a gauge?
Yes. You definitely can't. It's less accurate. If I'm really serious and I'm trying to win, I'm just going to do the most accurate thing. But if you just want if you got a long way to go, it's just not something. I've heard of a lot of other people do it, and I've done it. It's just not something you do very often, so I'm a little unpracticed at it. But yes, you can. It is less accurate. Another thing is just a couple of quick things is a lot of times if I'm looking for something where the control is, it's the big bank of Reentrant or something, or a big, bowl, it's kind of good to try to imagine what it's going to look like. Like if I look ahead on the map, it's like you just kind of, I don't spend a lot of time, not like some Zen thing, but it's kind of like, oh, it's probably, I just like, yeah, it's probably going to look a little bit like this. So then when you kind of get there, it's there. Another quick thing is this is just trying to speed you along. The control is not your destination if you're doing a race. So I don't like to look ahead on my map too much because then I might lose where I am. But I kind of like to say at this control, my next one's over to the left a little bit. So when I get there, I'm going to head out that direction. And I already know that. So when you get to the control and you punch it, you just punch in, you go. It really impresses other racers. Because you'll find to get to a control and a bunch of people they think the control is their destination. They get to the control and yeah, we got it. And they're like, oh, now what are we doing? And they're standing there at the control like, and you just kind of, and you just keep on going. And one, it impresses people. And two, it really does save a lot of time. Because it's amazing how much time you waste. If you got like 20 controls and you waste 30 seconds or 15 seconds at each control saying, now where am I going? Well, 20 times half, it's 10 minutes you just threw away. So that's just a simple little racer speed thing.
And another thing, so imagine, especially with, this is super common with 4-person teams. So this is control up here, this is what you're all going to be looking for during the race. All of the controls have the pin punch here. This is like a unique pattern of pins. So we'll give you a passport. This little guy, it's just a piece of like white Tyvek paper, so it's waterproof, pretty tear-proof. You'll get to the control. This one is number 29. You can see that they're all labeled. So then you'll just find the box that's labeled 29 right here on your control or on your passport, and then you just punch like that, and it shows a unique pattern so that when you turn this in at the end of the race, you can prove that you're all there. So that's the mechanics of what happens at a control. Now imagine that it's really tricky. We don't have a lot of tricky controls in the 8 hour just because we're not tricky people for this type of thing. But imagine that you're doing like a 24-hour race. It's at night. This control is really hard to find. Your team found it. You've got 4 people with your headlamps on, and you're standing at the control, punching, and then looking at your map, figuring out where to go next. It's like you're a beacon for all the other teams in the area, like, come to me, find my control, I'm standing right next to it.
Yeah.
And you're just giving away your advantage that you just gained by finding it before anyone else. So, number one, it's impressive when you can just roll into a control, punch and go. But number two, you're actually, it's a competitive advantage too, to not give away that location to anyone else.
The other thing is normally have the navigator looking at the map to move to the next one while another teammate goes to do the punch itself. So it's best not to send, if you have that luxury, don't send the navigator to the punch. Let them figure out the next maneuver and have somebody else.
Yeah. If you're the navigator, have other people do as much as possible.
Even feed you. We feed our navigators so they don't even have to open their pockets because they've got the map in one hand, their compass in the other. It's really hard for them to. It's just pretty simple. It's hard for you to get in your hip belt and open Ziploc baggies of cookies or whatever.
Or you forget. You forget that
It's
you're
very common for navigators not to eat because they just forget to eat.
Yeah, they're busy.
Because they're too busy doing other things and it's not even. It's a very mental.
Now, rather than just keep yapping at you, I drew if you look on the bottom right, and I'm not sure I drew enough. A few people might not have it.
The back row, you do not have these lines.
There's a red triangle and a red square on the bottom right of your map. Within a couple of inches of the bottom of the right of the map. It's a red triangle and a red square, hand drawn in. If you don't have it, maybe bring your map up real quick, and I'll draw it on there.
Or I can draw one.
Or you can just
Draw one and I'll bring it back.
Circle to the top.
Remember where you are? Quickly.
Okay. Now this is for USGS. This is a really long leg. But it's kind of interesting. I'm going to say let's start at the triangle, and you want to go to the square. Now, one thing to let you know, this is a really steep area. This is like private land. I don't never orienteered down there. I just picked that. But that is like as big or near, yeah, about as big a hills as you'll find in Greensfelder or thereabouts. In Greensfelder, it's probably most of you know it's pretty steep and hilly. So you don't want to just pound up and down over every hill if you can. So if you're going from the red triangle to the red square, think about how you're going to do it. I mean, you could draw a straight line between them, use your compass, and just go a straight line. But you're just going to see what's going to happen there. You're going to go down and up and down into the creek and up over the top of a big hill and all that. So just kind of imagine what you're going to do and just kind of you take your finger and just kind of work your way along how you'd go and kind of picture what it'd look like. So as you start, I'm going to start going right. And obviously the red triangle is on a little hilltop, on a big giant ridge. So you're going to start going down a little hill. And you're going to go through this skinny little saddle with a reentrant, coming down, going down off of each side, like a little water course going down off each side. Skinny little saddle. Then you're going to climb back up over kind of a big hill. It's going to hook left a little. Then you're going to have to make a right pretty quickly, or else you're going to go down this big long spur. Is everybody following along? Then you go right a little bit, you go through another little saddle, and that's where that little red dotted line goes through the saddle, right next to the brown 700. Then you climb back up. Now you can see there's a little road up there. There's not a road at first, but right after the 700, the next hilltop is a little dark. It's hard to read. You need good eyes. There's a little black double line. That's a Jeep road. That's not a major road. It's like a little Jeep road. Those can be hit and miss. Sometimes they're old and they're growing over and trees have fallen over them. Sometimes they're wonderful. So now you can just follow this road. You have to go along. And when you get to another hilltop, you see there's a little road junction at another hilltop where the little blue line goes across. Now you make a right.
Where's the road?
It's the little black.
Yeah. See these little yellow lines here that are
Yeah.
flat?
You need to look real close.
Very faint.
Yeah. This is a
Is
bad.
it the blue?
What's that?
Like it's like the
Is
dark.
that it right there? The dark blue. Yeah.
It's like two little parallel black lines going along the ridge top.
I thought you meant the horizontal.
Oh,
Yeah, really.
So,
Yeah.
so you really need good eyes. So this is a tough sport for old people.
We are not having surgery for this race.
Yeah.
Just bring a magnifying glass.
Reading
Do
glasses.
you do that?
Well, a handful of years ago, my eyes started to get where I couldn't focus close, and I tried one contact that was like super close and one was super far. Some people like it, but then I couldn't see either real well. So I ended up with progressive, basically glorified bifocals, and that does a good job. Or if you're nearsighted, you can look over the top of your glasses. So as you get old, young people don't have to worry about it. Look at Alice.
I'm still trying to find the 700.
Oh, it's brown. It's really teeny tiny. So you see how that little red line goes at an angle? The little red dotted line goes at an angle and then makes a little corner.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
So you follow this little road. So little things. Now when you see that little Jeep road, as I said, it might not be there, or it might be great. So you can take a grain of salt whether it's going to be there or not. But when it is, and it probably is, now all of a sudden you got something great to run over. Now you run on, and so now you're going to be heading north, and you hit the little road junction. And you turn right. So basically, I'm staying on the ridge. Now when you make a right on the road junction, you go through another saddle up to the hilltop. Now the road turns north, but you don't want to go that way. So you have to know when to jump off the road and stay on the ridge. So just kind of imagine, that's a tricky one. That'll take you a long time to get to. And you could go shorter, especially at the end. When you get close to the square, you see where that little black dotted line, which is probably a power line. That little black dotted line is probably a power line. And power lines are hard to follow because oftentimes there's all kinds of they cut the trees down. So there's all kinds of brambles and stuff because the trees, are letting the light through and all the brambles grow. And power lines don't care if they just slam up and down over the steepest hills. They don't care. So power lines are kind of hard to use.
They sound great in theory, like, oh, a power line, it's going to be open and easy, and it
Once in a
usually
while
is
it is.
terrible.
Yeah. So when you get to where that little black dotted line that goes at an angle up to the right, getting close to the black square, I would be tempted, if it's wide open on top, I'd be tempted to just keep running south to the next ridge top junction, and then kind of turn around and come back. Or I might just go down through the creek and up, which is a lot shorter. And at that point, at that little spot, it's hard to know which would be best there. I would say if the woods are super open, I would go around, just because I know how steep these hills are. But that's a long way around. If the woods are kind of thick and it's slow, then I might be more tempted to just bite the bullet and go down through the creek and back up. But that's the kind of stuff you have to.
And then your teammates are going to ask the navigator, are you sure? Is the hill really that steep? And then the navigator says, oh, it's not that bad. You'll be fine.
Yeah, and then you're crawling on all fours.
Right, yeah.
I was curious on that, how rookie a move would it be to just drop right south from the triangle into the creek valley and then take that part?
Oh, that's not rookie at all. Yeah, that's not rookie. The only thing is you're giving up a whole lot of elevation that you're going to have to get back. So that's the one problem. But that's, going down to the creek is not rookie. Now, just my experience, generally creek bottoms are a little slower going than ridge tops. It's a dice roll. Sometimes in Indiana, well, a lot of times in Indiana, there's a little jeep road down every ridge top. But a lot of times, for some reason, also in Indiana, there's not a jeep road. It's brambly on the top, and the bottom's better. It's really a dice roll, but on average, I find creek bottoms to be slower going. Because sometimes a ridge top, it's just like, it's because it's rounded. Ridge usually the terrain is pretty forgiving on a ridge top, at least in this area. And the only thing is whether it's thick vegetation or not. But if it's kind of open and it's a nice, smooth, leafy, man, you can run like you're on a road on some of the ridges around here. You go down in the creek bottom, and you're in a creek, and the creek going like this, and you have to keep crossing the creek, and the log falls down. So just on average, if I've got a choice between a ridge and a creek, I'll take the ridge. But that's not a rookie move at all, not at all. It's a totally fine way to go. And if it just so happens that ridge top has to be full of brambles, and the bottom has a road in it, which or is easy, you went the better way.
Luck on that one.
Luck. It's luck with a little bit of educated guess that, ridges around here are usually better than creeks.
So the route you were describing earlier, you stuck mainly to the ridge top then?
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea where you went, but I'm guessing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. You're probably
Yeah.
guessing right.
Even though it's a
And you-
little, it's not straight line efficient, you're staying high
Yeah.
the whole time, so you're never having to exert yourself over a huge hill. Yeah, it's a little longer, but on the whole,
Yeah.
you're probably saving some energy.
Because if that ridge is really open vegetation, just really nice running, you can cover some ground in a pretty big hurry there. Whereas if you're climbing up some of these steep hills, it takes a long time to get up a big hill. Now, that's the way I would go for this, steep hill area. If you get into an area that's subtle, where, there's hills and a ridge and all, but, the hills just aren't that big, they're not that steep, then I'm more likely to, I'm just going to go straight there. But then the thing you have to worry about going straight there is you might get lost. And if you kind of follow a ridge, be careful though, ridges a lot of times have intersections, as you can see here. There's little intersections, and especially at night, you can miss the intersection, and now all of a sudden you're going down the wrong ridge. So if you're running a ridge, keep a close eye on your compass. So if you're going along saying, well, my ridge was supposed to turn east, but I'm heading straight north, you might want to uh-oh, but I missed, where could I have missed?
Nice thing about this race, will all be during the daylight.
Yeah. If
Yeah.
you're doing it at
Or
night,
something's got really.
it's wrong.
You call it You call us before we start, we'll
Yeah.
come get you.
We'll come get you.
I can't think of much else. I mean, there's all, you can always talk forever, but.
Yeah, we can talk forever. But so those are kind of like our overarching principles, we'd say.
Mhm.
David Fry's tips for a solid day of navigation. Like kind of like
Just
we
be
said.
careful navigating. You
Yeah.
know, don't run like crazy saying, I'm gonna go like crazy, I'll find out where I am when I get there. It's like that's, unless you're on a road or it's super simple, that's rarely gonna work out well.
Yeah.
Don't overrun your navigation skills or your navigator. In the beginning of the race, it's really easy because all of a sudden, we're gonna have 300 racers this year taking off out of the gate.
Yeah.
And some people know where they're going, other people are followers, and then it's your team. Do you know where you're going, or are you a follower? Don't be the follower that follows a team that doesn't know where they're going.
Well, that's fun.
So stay on your map
Yeah.
and just be patient, because you can go a lot faster if you know where you're going versus just going fast and not knowing where you're going, if that makes sense. There's some really fast teams out there that cover twice the mileage that you would take getting there if you know where you're at on the map.
Question about navigation. So, you don't necessarily know exactly where you're at on the map at any moment in time. You have to have a feature that you can,
Well, when things
look
are going,
at on the ground or this.
yeah, I mean, the features is what I use to know where I am on the map. But when things are going well, you know, things don't always go well. But when things are going well and I'm paying attention, I would say, yeah, I know exactly where I am. But I'm not just doing it by, I magically know. I'm doing it because I've been going down this ridge, and the ridge made a bend to the left to the north. You know, I'm going east on the ridge, and okay, the ridge made this bend to the north, and I see on the map where the ridge makes a bend to the north. I know exactly where I am, but I'm using the feature to know where I am. But generally, 90% of the time in a race, I know pretty doggone close exactly where I am. And when I don't, it's like, you know, you can waste an hour. Not in this race probably, but you know.
This thing in terms of, if you're, because there are a lot of these on Saturday,
Mhm.
where it's like, do we go over the ridge or follow the trail around the perimeter of it? And to go over the ridge, you could kind of get a bearing.
Yeah,
But when you get to the top of the ridge, you don't know where you're at, if you're making a straight line to
Yeah.
control. So is it worth like picking a tree on top while you're standing in a known
Yeah.
location?
yeah. If you're following a bearing, picking a tree in the distance and going to that tree is great. What I found is, you pick this tree, oh yeah, like, you know, it looks like, you know, it's got this owl in the branch and all this stuff. And you're hiking along and you look up and the owl flew away and you're like, what tree was it? You know, you think you'll remember, I'm joking about the owl, but you think you remember the tree, and it's amazing how often you run for a while and it's like, oh, what tree was that again? But sure, you know, there's no exact way to do it. There are just certain things to do that limit your chances of error. A lot of it is limiting and sometimes I'll go especially at night, I will go the definitely longer, slower way, hillier, climb down and up a hill. You know, from a physical point of view, I will go the worst way because I'm like, if I go this way, I'm pretty sure I'll find it. And if I take this better, you know, if somebody had put a chalk line through the woods, it's like, well, clearly that'd be the better way. But if I go that way, there's a 20% chance I might waste 10 minutes because I'm lost, or 15 minutes or whatever. You know, sometimes I will go the worst way because it's the easier navigation way. And it's all just it's a guess. It's all an educated guess. And like I say, if you did the drop down to the creek and ran up to the creek and that was great running and I had this thick brambles and stuff, then you picked the right way.
And
There's a
that's,
lot of good conversations post-race about
Yeah.
Right.
how did you get from this one to that one?
that's like just when you're done and you made it to the finish line, make sure you bring your maps to award ceremony. And I think we're gonna have like a little post-race unofficial happy hour also. Like, bring your maps. Like, that's another great way to learn is like, okay, now you just went through this race same as 300 other people. That's 300 other like experiences that you can compare yours against to learn. Wow, those guys, they went straight at it and there wasn't too much vegetation. They went pretty good. Or, yeah, they went straight at it and they ran into 5 thickets and huge set of down trees. Like, so it's just really cool to bring your map and I mean, it's one of my favorite parts is you're just pointing at these little parts on the map and talking about your individual team experiences getting from checkpoint to checkpoint.
Maps and fingers go together. When you see a picture after especially orienteering meets,
Yeah.
where or the navigation is all there is, somebody taking pictures and put it on Facebook. You see everybody there with their heads huddled together, and everybody's got their finger on the map pointing where they went. And speaking of which, practice makes perfect. You know, we could talk to her blue in the face, and it doesn't make you good at it. There's an orienteering meet this Saturday at West Tyson.
Yep. West
And,
Tyson in the morning.
Yeah, be there, be square. As far as if you really want to practice, orienteering's a fun sport on its own.
So what you can expect at O-Meet is there'll be a couple different courses set out. So it's, I think we're going to do 3 different courses at West Tyson. So there'll be a beginner map, an intermediate map, and an advanced map. It'll say how long the route is, so you can kind of judge how long it will take you. And then you can just start with, if you're kind of new, start with the beginner map. If that goes well, you can come back and just be like, okay, that went well. I'd like to try the intermediate map, and kind of work your way up. Or if you want to just bite the bullet and go for the advanced map right off the bat, that's fine too. Just make sure to watch your watch so you don't get stuck in the woods after dark. But it's just it's really low key. Bring a compass. If you don't have one, there's usually some rentals, but if you have a compass, you should bring that. We'll talk a little bit about kind of some clothes and gear, but it's just orienteering is a super small sport, so anytime there's new people at a meet, it's an exciting day. That the people that normally go to meets, they love to see new people, and I'm included in that group. So it's don't think it's an intimidating, elite sport. There's some amazing athletes that go, but it's really small, so we just love to see new people. Same with adventure racing, in the grand scheme of things, I mean, maybe if you talked about it at work, you told your coworkers, yeah, I'm going to do this adventure race, and they're like, I don't know what that is. I've explained it to a lot of people at my company, so, just don't be afraid to try something new.
Yeah, and orienteering, it's not such a tiny sport if you're willing to travel. It's not real big in St. Louis, and it's generally not terribly big anywhere in this country. But I mean, there's some. Chicago's got a big club, and Cincinnati's got a good club, and Kansas City's got a good club. St. Louis got a good club. So if you travel around, you can do a lot of orienteering. It's a lot of fun. In Europe, it's huge. They'll get 20,000 or some people. I've never gone to one of their big meets, but they'll just get unbelievable amounts of people at a big orienteering meet where people come from all over the country. So it's fun. I mean, I'm not trying to talk you into going to Europe or here,
but if you need an excuse to go, there's one.
Take me in your suitcase.
Yeah. Okay, we're just hit.
Yeah. Real quick question. You made this triangle a square, and then I know we're supposed to plot the coordinates the night before. Is that kind of generally the wide range or is it going to be more pinpoint of where the
I used to do my things with a circle, a red circle, and my circles are usually about the size. I just did a triangle and a square, so you know which one is
When you're in
which.
the general area, then you just do
Well, my circle is usually about the size of what I drew there.
Okay.
That's what I draw. You can draw anything you want.
Okay.
But then the control is in the center. I try to draw it accurately. The control's in the center of the circle.
Okay.
So you don't want to put a big blob of ink where the control is, because then you're inking out what you need to see to find it.
Right. As
That's
opposed
why-
to just putting a point.
You can do that,
Okay.
but some people do points. Orienteering is typically a circle, so I just got used to it. And then I put the number, next to the circle.
Yeah. So Mark brought up a really good point. I'm just going to touch briefly on this, and then I have a couple instructional videos that I email out after this class. But on Friday before the race, you'll come here to the Alpine shop. You'll pick up your race packet. It'll have the race maps that you'll get the night before. I can't, we don't guarantee that you're going to get 100% of the course the night before, but you get the majority of it, like say 75 to 80% you'll get maps for. And then we always reserve, the possibility of finding a bonus map out on the course that you'll just see like immediately during the race. But anyway, you'll get the majority of the maps the night before. We'll also give you a clue sheet which lists all the controls, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, however many there are. It'll list a clue next to them, so it'll say hilltop or reentrant or whatever the feature that you're looking for, trail junction. See you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. And then it'll have 2 coordinates. They're UTM coordinates, and if you can remember back to, I guess is it 7th grade maybe, where you do X and Y plotting on a graph. So it's essentially a worldwide version of X and Y coordinates. So let's go back to this map that we handed out on the edges. So the blue kind of lines that form a grid across the whole map, those are the UTM lines. And then the blue numbers on the side or on the perimeter, those are the UTM grid numbers. So we'll give you, a easting, which will go east to west, and a northing number, which will go north to south. And basically you plot all of your points on the map from those numbers. So it's just a glorified X and Y plotting system. And so that's what it means when we talk about UTMs. The really handy thing when we overlay the UTM grid across the whole map, this blue kind of, all the squares, each one of these is 1 kilometer apart. So that makes it really pretty easy to quickly gauge distance. What kind of I like to do is just take your fingers and put them on 2 of the corners. So you'll go, I'm going to pick a white area so you can see this a little better. But we're down on the map, but see, so we've got our blue UTM grids. Just put your fingers like this, like, oh, that's 1 kilometer. And then you can kind of space out, like, say you're paddling here, and, here's 1K, 2K, 3K. So you can kind of quickly measure, instead of taking a ruler or something and doing that, you can just do it with your fingers real quick to just give you kind of a rough baseline of distance. So that's UTM.
Which stands for what?
What's that?
Stands for?
Universal Transverse Mercator Mapping System. So, Jeopardy for $800.
Yeah.
What is UTM?
Would you just say split up the globe in these, in a box grid system? And that's just what they call that system, which USGS uses. The problem is the globe's round, and boxes are boxes, so there's spots in the country. You don't run into it as much as you would think, but there's spots in the country where the lines come together and it gets really wonky and hard to figure out. But surprisingly, that's kind of rare. You would think it'd be all over, but it's kind of rare.
The Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah,
They kind
Right.
of like this.
That's exactly what's happening down there. Yeah.
I've never seen it around here.
Great. So David kind of mentioned this. So the night before the race, when you're marking up your maps, it's always best to just kind of keep things small the first go around. So you're plotting the UTMs for 1. Either put a little pinpoint or a little circle around that feature where checkpoint number 1 is. Maybe label it with a small number 1. Go on to 2, 3, 4. Do all that stuff, and then after your points are plotted, then you can start adding other information to the map if you want to. But it's really important, your first go around to make sure that you're not scribbling over some important features later on that you're going to need. So just try to keep your map marking as tidy as possible. Kind of less is more a little bit, but you also want to make sure that you can read everything you wrote. And if you're going to write notes to yourself or the clues next to the coordinates, that you can see them. So Earl, we brought a USGS map from a previous race in Wyoming. You can kind of see how we marked it up just to kind of give you an example.
So when we did this thing Saturday,
Mhm.
you gave us a map with circles and numbers.
Yep.
So when we do this event,
Uh-huh.
you're gonna get a map without circles and numbers.
Correct.
But instead, we'll get a cue or a clue sheet,
Right.
and we have to figure out where the circles and numbers go.
Correct.
Now, it sounds to me like there is some skill in determining where the circles and numbers go.
It is. I would say it is a skill, but it is not something like terribly difficult.
But
I would say.
in this room of all these people in here, with one clue and the coordinates, so the UTMs or
Right.
whatever,
Mhm. Yep.
I would venture to say that there's probably at least gonna be 6 different ideas of how it works.
I can see how you can think that, but the UTM coordinates will help you map the checkpoints to the nearest meter. So we actually typically only give you to the 10 meter accuracy level, because otherwise you would go crazy at the scale of the maps, like trying to like fine tune that. But to the nearest 10 meter is, the flag will be somewhere in this room, maybe a little bit bigger than this room. And in general, you'll be able to see it wherever you arrive within the 10 meter area. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense, and then based upon what we experienced on Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
were those 10-meter circles?
The circles were probably a little bigger.
Oh,
I don't really scale them, I just kind of plop them on there.
Okay. I
Um,
was just like, because it seemed like they would have been a lot bigger, but of course the scale is very different and.
Sure. Yeah. And so what we do, you get your coordinates that will bring you to the nearest 10 meters, both northing and easting, and then you'll also get the clue, which will be, we try to keep our clues very obvious. So a trail junction, and you'll be able to see on the map, oh, there's a trail junction in that 10 meter by 10 meter area. Bend and trail is another common clue. Hilltop. We do use Reentrant a little bit. Bridge.
Northeast side of pond. you
Yeah.
know? Whereas like there's a pond there and it will plot on one corner, one edge, and the clue would be that general vicinity of that pond. And for this race, we want it to where you get close and you're gonna see it. Kind of like what we had said on Saturday. It's like we're not gonna try to hide anything. Once you get within a reasonable distance of that circle, we're not gonna put it down here somewhere, unless it's a ditch, but you don't know what the ditch is. But for the most part, we're not gonna hide it from you. We want you to be successful.
And the other reason that we do, that we print the maps and then have everybody plot their own checkpoints, it's mostly the kind of the unpredictability of putting on a race in the woods. We want to, number one, the maps take a certain amount of time to print and ship to us, and we want the flexibility to adjust our course, really up to, we're setting the controls Friday up to, we've been out there till like 2 o'clock and packet pickup is at 4. So, if the river's super high, we might take out some controls. If there's an ice storm coming, we might remove some controls or relocate them to kind of safer areas. So that's kind of the reason for the plotting, and
We try to keep the plotting to a minimum. We want you to be successful. But there's just certain things that until you've directed a race, you don't understand it. But once you've started directing, it's like if we gave you a map that had 30 checkpoints already plotted on it, and we have to, all of a sudden, for whatever reason, a permit gets pulled or a landslide comes through, just something that would change the course dramatically, we don't want to have you to start all over and mark up a map that we've already done. So we're going to do the best we can to provide you with as much as you can, as we can, but there's just certain parts of this event that
Also, the big out-of-town meets tend to have UTM plotting, so this is a good time to learn.
And then one more final thing about UTMs. We started this last year, and I think we're going to do it again this year. We had 2 check maps at like in the morning of the race that you could come and like check your map against. So if you're like kind of new to the plotting world, which we hope you are because we love new racers, then there's like, you know, a map that has all the checkpoints correctly plotted that you can compare yours against and just make sure before the actual race starts. It's just that if all 300 people plan to do that, we only have 2 of these maps, it's like kind of a nightmare. But if you're just using it as a quick, like, okay, got all my points, we're good, that's kind of how we intend for that to be.
Or don't be afraid to ask another racer walking around with maps and say, hey, where did you put 27? And you just compare. It's like, okay, yeah, we're in the same spot. And the other thing is if the clue's a river and there's no river there, either we gave you the wrong coordinate or you're in the wrong spot. We really try to make sure our coordinates are right. Sometimes we
had to change 2 last
we
year,
get
and that was
caught
like
in it, but
unacceptable for
it's one of
me.
those things after you look at it 1,000 times a week, it's very normal for you to see, but you kind of miss some stuff sometimes. But, you know, if it says creek and it's not flying in a creek, something might not be right.
Okay, let's talk really briefly about feet, because trekking is the most hardest.
I think I might bug out.
Running out? Okay,
Yeah, all right, see ya.
thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good one.
You get out.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
might, oh, you're welcome. Maybe I'll,
Just out of the way.
good to see y'all.
Good to see you, David. Thank you for coming.
Okay, so just really briefly, the shoes that you should wear while trekking. These are actually the shoes that I wore on Saturday when we were setting that course. So they're Solomon speed crosses. I use these like a lot, but really any shoe with just some sort of trail focused sole is going to be what you want. Unless you're a golden retriever and you have 4 legs instead of 2, she doesn't need any shoes. But just something that has like some sort of traction or aggressive lugs, it really helps, especially when it's slippery out there. Just gives you a little bit more confidence running up and down hills. And then you have your own insoles. I always put super feet in them. And this is something that I learned working at Alpine shop, putting super feet in my shoes. It's hard to get used to because you like bought a really nice pair of trail shoes, and then super feet are like another $50. They're like really nice insoles. So it's like, I don't blame you if you don't want to put these in, but I found that my feet are a lot less tired because these are just a little bit, you know, beefier than the actual insoles that come with the shoe. So it goes from person to person. If you have super tough feet, you have a lot of like fat padding under your metatarsal bones. It's like, I'm jealous because I don't have that. So that's why I just put the extra insole in to give me a little bit more longevity on my feet. Another really nice thing is the quick laces on the Speed Cross. They just basically have this little tightener, and you just pull it in, tuck it into a garage on the tongue, and then your laces are out of the way. Especially, it's great when you have cold hands or cold fingers and you can't physically tie your shoes. You don't have to. You can just slide the connector back in there, and you're good to go. For socks, we like a super thin sock. Can you grab it out of the bag? I think I brought the gray ones. Yeah. So this is kind of counterintuitive. When I started adventure racing, I wanted like a super cushy, like hiking style sock, just because I was worried about my feet getting tired and sore. But the thing about the cushy socks is that there's a lot of material, and when they get wet, they just hold water for a long time. So I actually started going to like as thin a sock as possible, and I've been really happy with it for like several years. So these happen to be Swiftwick. I mean, there's a lot of other, we're not here for it to be a commercial, but this is just a synthetic sock. It's super thin. There's some compression in there on the arch, so it's supposed to be like anti-fatigue. But in general, what I'm just looking for in a trekking sock, or really for an adventure racing sock, is something super thin, it dries really quickly, and minimal amount of cushioning to keep that water away from my skin, and just to keep it, prolong the blistering or avoid it altogether. Foot lube. So another thing that we use on our feet before races is some sort of foot lubricant. This one is called Gurney Goo. It's a silicone-based foot lube. Basically, lubricates all of your skin on your feet. It's just like a lotion. You kind of rub it in between your toes, tops of your toes, bottoms of your toes, on your heels. I unfortunately in a race we did this year forgot to put it on the tops of my feet, and that blistered and it was really painful. So word to the wise, also get the tops of your feet. But it just helps everything kind of move and not stick against one another, especially in between your toes if you have kind of some dry skin, that over time, moving back and forth as you're running and kind of moving your feet over the terrain, that'll create a hot spot and then eventually a blister. So anything you can use to kind of help everything inside your shoe and inside your sock play nice together, that's something that's very important.
Or just something that's really simple to access is Walgreens has a product called Desitin, that works great. You don't need to go buy anything special or fancy for an 8-hour race. You might be able to get by without anything, but if you want to just do something quick, a little Desitin between your toes, and just, you're going to end up with wet feet, pretty much guarantee that, and then you're going to get sand in between your toes, and that's what generates that friction that normally causes your first onset of blisters. I don't have a straight toe, so I always have some sort of issue with stuff rubbing, so I've gone to a lube and then the toe socks.
One of the things that's kind of biking, kind of orienteering that you guys talked about last year was where you keep your map and how often you look when you're biking. I don't know if we're going to hit that later, but
Yeah.
bolstering that was a challenge for us.
Yeah. We'll kind of touch on it more in our biking session, which is next week, maybe? Whichever one. We're just here every Monday and we'll talk about whatever. But yeah, so when you're looking at your map when you're trekking versus when you're biking, it's kind of different. Number one, when you're trekking, you're going slower typically than the speed that you go when you're biking. So you kind of need to adjust how many times, either per minute or per kilometer, if you want to put it by distance, how many times you look at your map. So like David was saying, he's going to be looking at his map literally every 5 seconds when he's trekking, just a quick glance, check, glance, check. When you're biking, it's a little different because typically you're on a road or a trail that's a little bit easier to follow. You're not off trail, just totally relying on features, so you can look at it sometimes a little bit less. But in general, you want to look at your map more than you think you have to, just as a general rule. So the more accessible you have it, either in your hand, in a nice map case, and then when you're on your bike, you want to figure out some sort of map board, clipboard attachment, something that you can give your map good visibility without having to reach in your pocket and pull out your map and look at it and then shove it back in your pocket and keep biking. So just kind of something to think about as we're launching into race time. I guess the one final thing that we'll chat about is packs. This is not a big deal, but it's sometimes overlooked when if you're a person that's going to use different shoes for biking, like clip-in shoes and trail running shoes for trekking. You're going to want to test your pack out to make sure that you can carry your trail running shoes while you're biking. I've done this a couple times where I've packed my pack the night before, and then I get to the race and I was like, oh crap, now I have to figure out where to put my trekking shoes and carry them with me while I'm biking. I just didn't think about that the night before. So something that if you have space in the main compartment of your pack with all your other mandatory gear, that's great. If you can shove them in this kind of outer stretchy pocket if your pack has one, or the side pockets, that's great. But just be careful when you're attaching shoes to the outside of your pack, because it seems maybe not every year, but almost every other year a shoe accidentally falls out and it doesn't get noticed, and then you show up at the next section and you have one or no shoes to trek in.
So I've seen, it happens more than one would think. So one person, you see somebody walking around, so they end up doing the whole thing in their bike. First of all, if you don't have bike shoes, and you're doing trail running shoes, this is not an issue for you. You'll have the same pair of shoes on the whole time. But for those that want to change shoes, so it's like if this were my pack, is what I would do is I'd put both of these in the back pouch and then just feed this through your keeper here and snap it back. That way you just, there's a safety catch in there. So yeah, if it falls out, you still have it fastened around back there.
So are you also carrying your bike shoes when you trek?
No. Your bike shoes and bike helmet will stay with where you, for this race,
They stay with the bike?
will stay
Yep.
with the bike when you set it down.
Questions?
Is it part of another session where the whole structure of the event is covered?
Yes.
Just like in terms of when you're on bike, when you're not?
Yep, so the last, our class number 4, which is the Monday before the race, we talk a little bit about food, like what to eat out there, and then we talk the rest of the night about strategy. So we don't reveal the actual layout of the course that's coming up, but we'll kind of talk about what to expect as far as the clue sheet information, how to kind of pace your day, and just, you know, kind of overall logistics of the day and how they play into the race versus like a specific discipline, like trekking. So that's a really good one to come. They're all good. I should come to all of them. That's my goal. Tess will be at all of them. That's the reason. Okay, any other questions? Good?
That's great, thank you.
Okay,
So yeah,
cool.
we'll be around cleaning up, so if you have any questions. And then the other thing is if you can make it on the 17th to our training session that we will be at Castlewood.
Yep.
Saturday the 17th from 10 to 2, we'll set another course like we did last weekend, and hopefully it's a little drier so that those that want to bike can do that. But grab your teammates and
Super low pressure. I mean, there's no pressure. You just show up, take your time, grab a map, do your thing.
as well as the orienteering class meet on Saturday. That'd be a huge asset if you haven't been out orienteering. If you can
Yep.
go do that. What's the website? St. Louis.
I linked to it on the Castlewood Adventures Facebook page this morning. So it's put on by the St. Louis Orienteering Club. They've got their own website plus their own Facebook page, so that's the easiest way to find it.
Is that something you can just show up on the spot and register that morning?
Correct. Yep.
And do you plot out your own map as well, or?
They usually have them pre-printed.
Prepare out?
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, you're free.
All right,
Go.
thank you guys.